As a lawyer, what do you think the barriers have been? Why don't we have a Charter of Human Rights in Australia?
Well, I think partly because of lack of political will and courage. And we've had lots of attempts over the decades to get one, and it's sort of odd because Australia was leading when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was declared by the United Nations. So Australia was in the chair of the General Assembly and really had a very large part to play in the drafting and I guess the pressure to get the Universal Declaration came in large part from Australia in concert with a few other countries. And despite that, we've never managed to get a Charter of Human Rights in this country. There was a bit of a push in the 1970s. There was another bit of a push in the 1980s. The most recent significant push for a national charter happened around 2010 when the federal government engaged in a very broad consultative process that was chaired by Father Frank Brennan. It went round the country, it heard from people, and it asked people whether or not they thought Australia needed a human rights charter. And the answer was overwhelmingly yes. And that's been the case whenever we've had one of these inquiries, and there have been a few now, that the people overwhelmingly say yes, but then our politicians don't enact that. They sort of fall at the last hurdle, which is the actual passing of a law. Why might that be the case? One reason is that once you have a human rights charter, then that holds our political class to account. It holds our politicians to account. It requires them not to enact laws or behave in ways through policies and programs that could in some way breach our human rights. So it is a limit on the powers of our parliamentarians. And I think that may well be part of the problem of why we don't have a federal Charter of Human Rights. Sometimes it's the case that people say, well, it's really just a nice idea. It really wouldn't make a lot of difference. And I would absolutely push back at that. The reason we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is recognition of the most appalling things that were done to people during the Second World War. Citizens of Germany, particularly the sort of genocide that took place during the Second World War, but also the marginalisation of critical voices and a whole lot more. So that resulted in us having that international recognition of human rights. And so they're not just a nice idea. They're seen as fundamental to us being able to live full lives and have our dignity and respect always upheld.